great honor to be here, guys. Like, could I just echo the wow from Danny from initially, because I've never been part of something like this before, where in a room, so many patients, so many, international and national, sort of experts in this disease, and you're all here because there's one woman, and is absolutely gives me goosebumps, and not just from the aircon. So, but no, thank you all for being here, and for allowing, really me as a clinician have this opportunity to, grab the mic. Those who know me know I love karaoke. So, and a budding stand-up comedian. So really, my next session, this session, I'm hoping will be fun. What I want to do is basically lay really the foundations of sort of Haematology 101. Now, I know most of you are, probably going to be pretty cluey in terms of blood because, you're carers or patients with a blood disease. But I guess I want to try to fill in the holes. So I want to make this quite interactive and fun because when I'm in a lecture hall, it's been PTSD of all the sessions I missed in med school. So really, I want to give you an opportunity to sort of ask questions, interrupt me. I don't mind if I'm saying some crazy stuff or chucking out weird acronyms or putting out weird anime characters. Please ask questions. Put your hand up. I want to make it casual. So this is what I want to go through today, a really brief introduction to blood in terms of the components of blood, and very importantly, a little bit of how blood's made. Now, we're going to talk about the immune system. Now, you can see I've just completely plagiarized Phil, think of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, Phil really, he is the brains of the outfit. I'm just the mouth. So we're going to talk then about the immune system. And, this complicated thing, the immune system, man, when it's good, but when it's bad, it really screws you up and gives you various diseases, right? So we really want to dive a bit deeper into what the hell's actually happening with the immune system that causes ITP, and hopefully give you some sort of insights into why we, use various type of drugs, which I'm sure some of the audience are very familiar with. So I know there's a lot of cute characters up there, and you're wondering, what's this, Asian dude, this obsession with anime? This is actually a really awesome cartoon that I've introduced to. And you know what is amazing? So it's called Cells at Work. If you've got a VPN, you could just, flog it off Netflix from Taiwan, I believe. It's awesome. It's based basically on, this amazing, based on the human body with all these characters that represent the cells in our blood. What's amazing about it, it is scientifically so correct that I learned some shit when I watched it. Just saying. And really, I'm legit. I'm not kidding. And I want to highlight, I guess, there's actually the character for platelets. So that the cap she's wearing is Japanese for platelets, and by far the cutest character, right? Obviously the most important, really, isn't it? So what is blood? Now, we know if I were to fall over and bleed, as a 70 kilo, but a bit more, 78 kilo, adult male, I'll probably lose about 5 liters of blood before I'm completely empty. Now, we know that, when I'm bleeding out that pool of blood, what is it I'm actually bleeding out? Well, we know 55% of it's what we call plasma, this watery, yellowish liquid, and 45% of it contains cells. Okay, so it's not all just blood cells, running on the floor. It's predominantly fluid or plasma. So we know then there's three main, cells in our blood is the red blood cells, what we call erythrocytes, a scientific word that you might have come across, and also the white blood cells that we call leukocytes, and platelets, which we just call platelets. Unless we're American and we call it thrombocytes. No one ever calls them that. So now you all, know strangers getting blood taken, perhaps just recently, about 30 seconds ago. Now, if we were to spin your blood in a centrifuge, just based on gravity and the density, of the cells, you're basically able to separate these two main components of blood, right? To the watery plasma bit and the cells bit. And you can see on the right-hand side, that's exactly what happens when we spin blood down. That, this is whole blood, and after we spin it, you can see the yellowish plasma, component. And in between, in that interface, what we call the buffy coat. And that's really where the white cells and the platelets sit. And it's pretty cool when you look at that going, gosh, all that blood, and you're talking about the platelets just there? Bang for buck, I'm telling you. So in plasma, what is in there? What's in plasma? I think you can see that predominantly is just water. But very importantly, those got these very, very, very important proteins. And of course, when we do our proteins, when we break them down, the main proteins are really important. Is this thing called albumin. But you can see that it's got this thing called globulins, which is basically our antibodies. Yeah? But very importantly, it contains all the clotting factors that are critical for our blood to form clots. Okay, so that's within that 4% of that plasma as I'm bleeding on the floor. So when we look at then the blood glucose, as I mentioned, is mainly platelets and leukocytes. And of course, the rest is just made up of the red stuff, not charads, but red cells. So let's talk about red cells. I think you probably could appreciate from that picture in terms of that's probably the most abundant cell we have in our blood. So 45% versus just less than 1%, that's white cells or platelets. Now, it has a very important job. It essentially carries oxygen around to all of the tissues and organs in our body. And it does this via this thing called hemoglobin. So those of you who obviously look at your blood counts, you probably see that a lot, hemoglobin. So really that's just referring to how much of the red cells that we have, I guess, in our blood sample. So, and we know that's exactly what the cells do. They travel around ferrying, essentially, oxygen to the various parts of our body. And in that really cute anime, that's what the red cell character looks like, carrying the little oxygen around the body. Now, the white blood cells, these are, the troopers. Literally the army that protects us from infections. Now, there's actually many, many different types of white cells. So really like any army that protects us, there's, different types of troops, I guess. And you can see when you break them down, there's probably 5 main type of white cells. And you probably see that when you have a blood count, you'll see the breakdown of the different various cells. And I've listed them there that, really the 2 main, most numerous white cells we have, the neutrophils, which fights bacteria and fungus. And then closely followed by the lymphocytes, really the B cells, the T cells, and what we call the natural killer cells. And again, those anime characters, if you watch, I probably should warn you, it's a very violent actually anime, as most Japanese ones are. So these are the cute characters, there's a lot of blood. So just, beware if you want to, 10-year-old watch it like I did, my kids. A bit violent. So now, of course, really the star of I think the show is the platelets. Now, I'm sure you all know, platelets are critical for really forming clots within our blood. Now, we know that when there's injury somewhere in the body, these platelets activate to really essentially then recruit clotting factors to plug that particular bleeding spot. Now, it's pretty amazing in terms of how sort of effective our bone marrow factory is making platelets. It is probably the cell that's made most prolifically, I guess, where it's about 1 trillion cells produced daily within our body. So this is just a bit of schematic in terms of what happens when I fall over and bleed out. Is that you get vessel injury, so there's a hole in our sort of blood vessel. The first thing the body does actually just it has this little spasm to try to close that little hole as much as possible. And then the platelets are the cells that are first on site to sort of go to that area of injury to then try to recruit them, the clotting factors, to essentially lay down, I guess, clot to plug that hole. Right? So obviously, absolutely critical for this process of stopping bleeding in the body. So we now know the main characters we have in our blood in terms of their roles. So where do they kind of come from? So I've alluded to this already before, the bone marrow factory, and that's where they're all made. So it's pretty phenomenal that within an hour, really about 100 billion red cells are being produced, and in terms of white cells, about 1 billion of them are being made, or 10 billion per hour. So it's a very, very active marrow factory. Now, how are they being made? They're made from what we call stem cells. And you can see from the sort of diagram on the right-hand side that these stems are pretty amazing things. They're able to essentially self-replicate. So you have these what we call totipotent cell that's essentially immortal, right? Just the way God made them. That you have these immortal cells that are able to essentially continue to give birth to what we call daughter cells that were able to make more of the, I guess, grandfather cells of various different cell lines to then make that specific cell. right? So you can see there that we have the blood stem cells here that's able to make red cells or white blood cells, but there's also stem cells for other components of our body as well, right? That helps in regeneration and healing as well. So the human body is pretty amazing. But we're going to concentrate, of course, mainly on the stem cells in our bone marrow that makes blood. And really, the way to think about it is like this really complicated family tree, right? That essentially there is a grandfather or grandmother cell for all of our different cell lines. So you can see here that for platelets, really the grandfather or grandmother cell is what we call the megakaryoblast, which then give rise to megakaryocytes, which we could physically see when we do bone marrow biopsies in patients. We're able to see these very big cells that basically bud off little platelets. Now, the red cell, I guess, equivalent is erythroblasts that basically give rise to red blood cells or erythrocytes. And then, in terms of the cells that comprise our immune system, the white cells, you can see that it comes from a number of different, progeny cells that give rise to all the different characters we have running around our blood. So that process of production is 1 to 10 billion per hour. Those stem cells are just churning out, replicating, and making these cells, which then spill out into our blood for them to hang around and kill bad guys. So let's specifically focus, okay, well, how does the body control the amount of platelets to make, right? Because a factory just can't, how would it know how much to make? This is such a beautifully elegant system. So we know that in our liver, a very special enzyme called thrombopoietin, or TPO, is basically produced continuously. So very much like erythropoietin, which is the red cell equivalent, Lance Armstrong's favorite drug. So TPO, we know, is essentially produced continuously and is able to bind to platelets and its grandfather cell, the megakaryocytes. We know that when it binds to them, essentially stimulates the megakaryocyte to make more platelets, okay? So TPO being made continuously, telling the marrow factory essentially to supply orders to make more platelets. Now, and we know the megakaryocytes, as you said, are very active. Now, here is the really interesting thing. So the platelet stem, the mature ones, soak up, in a way, the TPO. So when you have a normal platelet count and lots of platelets, the TPO levels are lower because they're being soaked up by the platelets, right? But when you've got a low platelet count, they're not soaking up the TPOs. There's more TPO circulating in the blood, bone marrow, telling the megakaryocytes to make more. It's such a beautiful, elegant system, isn't it? Of just controlling the amount of platelets, the rate of platelet production, depending on how much circulating platelets there are. And we know the platelets sort of they hang around, circulating the blood, just chilling out, looking for, I guess, bleeding spots when Danny falls over, to 5 to 9 days. And now we know that after that time, the use-by date, the spleen essentially, kind of realizes that's an old platelet and take them up and essentially removes them from circulation, okay? And then it's the circle of life where that, remember, 1 trillion platelets being produced constantly. So it's just being replaced constantly. So I probably summarized 5 decades of work from poor researchers in this 2-minute talk. Is that clear in terms of how the different components of blood and when, in a way, how you interpret your full blood count essentially? Yep, good.
I think there's a quiz later.
Sorry?
Maybe we're going to do a quiz later.
100%. But I was just going to give a shout out to the best T-shirt in the room, straight out of platelets. That is. I know. I saw. Yeah, that is straight fire. Awesome. All righty. Now we're going to go to the more advanced phase of this talk, and that's focusing on the immune system. Really, we're going to go a little bit more deeper now. Okay, so we all know what all the characters involved in our white cells. Now, what's the immune system? It's basically the kind of the network, combination of the tissues, the organs, as well as the actual mechanism by which we are protected from essentially, invading organisms. And really, there's 2 main sort of arms of it. There's got to be some way our immune system could identify that something is foreign. And then, of course, a way for it to then get rid of that, what it thinks is a foreign invader, okay? That's the key. Now, when we look at the cast members that are involved in this, we could broadly divide them into the innate and the adaptive, immune system. Now, why is that? Why is there two different kind of, arms of our immune system? It kind of makes sense when we think about, well, okay, we really want something that's very, very quick to respond when there's some sort of infection, right? And that's what the innate system is all about. It's an immediate response. And it doesn't it's always a set response to that particular situation. So what that means is that it can't differentiate what's invading itself. No matter what it is, you'll have a set response. So I used an analogy. It's kind of that if you're at an airport, that's kind of, our immune system is kind of like the guard dog that goes around sniffing, right? It's just there sniffing. It's trained to do just one thing. I think smell of drugs, I assume. Or the beef jerky in your pocket. But so it, in a way, only knows one thing, just to do one job, and that's to, look for something that's foreign. And that is it. It can't recognize in terms of that person looks dodgy or that, that person looks dodgy. It just knows that is something that's not foreign to the body, yeah? Now, so it's not specific to the actual invading thing. And very importantly, it doesn't remember if it encounters it again, right? I mean, dogs are very smart. I'm not saying they're dumb. But I guess that is a very basic immune response where, okay, it just knows what's friend or foe, and then it's not going to remember if it sees it again, yeah? And I guess these are the cells that are involved in that particular response. You can see the monocytes, the macrophage, neutrophils, the things I listed there, which are all, remember, part of that, leukocyte army that we have circulating in the blood. So that's the immediate response, our first line of defense. But we want more. We want the cavalry. And the cavalry is the adaptive immune system, where there's a bit of a lag time between something sort of comes into the body, like golden staph, and the body takes time to process that. The reason being, though, it's able to recognize that, hey, that golden staph looks this particular way. Let's check our memory. Let's check our database. Have we encountered this thing before? And I guess that takes time. And we know it takes probably about 5 to 10 days, potentially, for it to kind of remember that whether it's encountered that before. And it's not just remembering, it's also trying to remember for next time, in terms of if it encounters it again, what it looks like. And for that to happen, there's a very specific, cells, the B cells, which what does the identification of something foreign, and then requires the help of other cells that we call T cells as well, to kind of help it know for sure it's foreign to the body. And very importantly, though, it will be able to remember that for next time. And this is the whole basis of vaccines, essentially, right? Where what we're doing, we're getting components of, say, I said virus, there's one that we might have heard of recently, COVID. We're just taking a little portion of that so that the immune system will remember it when you actually catch COVID because it looks the same, right? So you're not waiting the 5 to 10 days for a response. The memory bank's already got it that, hey, we've seen that thing before from that jab. Let's mount an immune response to it to kill it. And I guess the adaptive immune system, it brings the thunder, right? You've got a guard dog. What really the adaptive immune system is the customs agent, rugby tackling you and calling the cops, right? So he'll mess you up, okay? So he will mess you up. So it's really a far more effective, a very, very strong immune response to kill that particular foreign invading organism. Does that kind of make sense? Guard dogging. Again, probably another 50 people's PhDs. I'm going to go even more hardcore now. Okay, so how does the body know it's foreign? How does the body know that golden staph is not meant to be hanging around in us? It's bloody smart. So, as I said, the B cells are the ones that kind of latch onto something, think it's foreign, right? But like most things, it really wants to be 100% sure. And how it does that is that it needs kind of a handshake, a tap on the shoulder from its buddy, the T cell. Now, the T cell is very important. When it's produced in the bone marrow, it goes to what I call the finishing school, the thymus, the gland here somewhere in your neck. And the thymus, it basically is an organ that sort of trains up T cells, where it checks to see whether it'll kind of, recognize parts of itself as being foreign. So you kind of only want to select out the T cells that knows what's friend or foe. The ones that are reacting to bits of his own body that then would cause autoimmunity or immune disease, you'll kill off, or is supposed to. It's supposed to. So the T cells are really, really important in this process, right? Because that is the crux of a lot of autoimmune disease. When our immune system fails to be able to check that the B cell hasn't latched onto something that it thinks it's foreign when it's not. Is that right? Yeah. So that's, I guess the whole thing where you need that second handshake. So putting it all together now, stay with me, the final stretch. When something comes in your bloodstream, your golden staff, the B cell latches onto it. It counts what we call the antigen, or the appearance of the cell, the little protein structure poking out of the staff, that he goes, that doesn't look right. Our body doesn't have that bloody thing. You'll latch onto that. And then he waits for his buddy to say, hey, T cell, mate, come here. Is this thing part of our body or not? Because I don't think it is. Now, if it was a well-behaving, well-educated T cell from the thymus, you'd be like, yep, that mofo is our golden staff. Let's get rid of it. And if it goes like, hold on, you just latched on to the platelet. Don't do that. That's part of our own body. Then that B cell would sort of abort, going, oh, my bad. Bad day. Haven't had my coffee. Let's back away and not kill that cute platelet that we saw. Let's back off. Okay. So let's just say that it is golden staff. It taps on the shoulder, going, hey bro, high five. You're right. That thing's bad. Let's get it. What happens then? Well, that B cell essentially has two fates. It then changes into, right, okay, I'm going to be a lazy sod. I just want to remember this for next time, and become what we call a memory B cell, which will then live on for decades. And that's how vaccines work. You have that immune memory for decades because you'll remember for next time. But thankfully, the more proactive B cells will go, you know what? We're going to do something about it. I'm going to turn myself now into a plasma cell that then churn out these little antibodies that will latch on to what it thinks is foreign, and that'll produce a huge ton of these antibodies to tag that particular foreign thing, to then have the rest of our immune system, all those other cells I talked about, the innate and the adaptive, all of them, to basically gang up and kill that thing. Yeah? Now, I'm going to link this in with what Phil had mentioned before about advances in our understanding. What makes the B cell turn into a plasma cell? BAFF and APRIL, the signals that we're finding circulating in the blood, right? So it's amazing that in just a few short decades, even though we thought we knew about the immune system, even to this day, we're still learning new things about it, okay? So have you stayed with me so far? Now, it gets even more complicated. So what I'm saying is that, okay, if ITP is a problem where we have naughty T cells, clearly skip a lot of classes like I did, and they didn't remember platelets were not foreign to us, well, surely if we got rid of the B cells with drugs that kill B cells, like rituximab, why is it we can't cure immune diseases, right? And it has to do with the plasma cells, because some of them unfortunately turn into what we call long-lived plasma cells that they hide away in our bone marrow, in our spleen. We can't really get to them with our current therapies. And forever they kind of remember that unfortunately it thinks the platelets are foreign to the body, right? They're hidden away. So hence this importance of new treatments of let's stop the production, I guess, of these B cells turning into plasma cells by blocking BAFF or APRIL, right? Does that make sense? Have I got you still? Or have I lost you? Yeah? Cool. Oh, no, it just went mad. I had a think about them. There you go. Bloody hell, I should have shown this. Anyway, pictures of 1,000 words, but I've spoken 1,000 words already. So, no, just really just showing us really, I guess, the fate, I guess, of these memory cells. So that's sort of what happens then when it re-encounters something it remembered. It actually turns into a plasma cell type thing again to produce the antibodies, yeah? Now, but what sucks to see here, this scenario, when you have a long-lived plasma cell that hides away in a survival. So the survival niche is basically a space where we can't get to them, bone marrow and spleen. Okay, so really, we know, in summary, about how platelets are, the production is controlled, right? TPO, depending on the amount of platelets, the manufacturer will make them. Now, we know in ITP, of course, what's fascinating, right, is that the liver, interestingly, is producing slightly less TPO in ITP, therefore less signal or supply orders to the marrow factory to then make more platelets. Now, why we think this is the case is that, well, obviously, the TPO seems to be really essential to tell our megakaryocyte grandfather cells to live, essentially. And we know then that in ITP, some people produce antibodies that kill off these grandfather cells, sadly. Of course, this means that we've got lower production from the marrow factory, but on top of that, we're getting these abnormal immune response now, where our immune cells think the platelets are foreign, have produced all these antibodies to tag them to be killed off, right? It's a double whammy. And hence, why? Splenectomy for a very, very long time has been shown to be effective in some patients anyway for this particular disease in sort of achieving a remission, okay? So I'm going to end up with 2 slides, which are a little bit complicated, but this is really essentially in one picture summarizes our current concept into what really causes ITP, and potentially then ways that we could obviously treat ITP by understanding the mechanism, okay? You know what? From what I've just hopefully talked about in the last 15 minutes, I reckon I have a good crack of going through this, and you're going to all understand now. So we know that in terms of the immune response, we have our B cell that has recognized something. Its T cell buddy has unfortunately told it, yes, it thinks the platelets are foreign. And that's essentially then formed a plasma cell making the antibodies against the platelets, right? So of course, these plasmas are making these antibodies and are tagging the megakaryocytes in the bone marrow, so they're not going to be making enough platelets. And of course, the platelets are circulating around are being tagged to be killed off, essentially, by our immune system. Right? Yeah, awesome. Which means that we could target every single step of that process now, hopefully. With drugs that we have now, drugs that are in development, and really that we're hoping that, of course, we'll be able to pick for our patients the right therapy that works for them. And this is where I think Phil's research is so important, because right now, when we meet a patient the first time, we have no idea which process in that patient is the most, is contributing the most to destruction of the platelets, because everyone is different. But imagine we had a way of doing a blood test of saying that, that signal tells us that you have an issue with more production. You need a TPO-RA. Or you've got a problem where that T cell is really naughty, you really skipped a lot of classes. We need to knock them out with a particular antibody that blocks the T cell, right? This, I'm hoping, for the future to ITP. And thank you all for your patience and questions.
Thank you. I don't think I ever want to go to an airport with you. I think I might go by myself. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I'm happy to run with the microphone. Or would you just want to digest a lot of that information.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this.
Oh, okay. You make me run the stairs. Oh my goodness.
I suppose this might be better for whoever, it might be Phil. The biobank, are they looking at the platelet scenario to see what it looks like as far as does it have all the antigens and so forth happening? Is that part of what the biobank's all about? So that you could get a better understanding for the individual as to where the breakdown is happening for them in their ITP?
Unfortunately, I think the people involved are right now taking blood samples.
I think save that one for our Q&A session at the end as well. We can.
Yeah. I did notice when Phil put up his slide, he's definitely measuring things like the TPO production levels in patients, as well as activation markers of platelets. And there were a number of, abbreviations that I certainly wasn't aware of that might be actual biomarkers that measure in terms of activation of the T cells and B cells. Yeah, great question, but I think they are definitely looking into that. Yeah.
Hold on, Kerry, give me a sec.
Oh. Don't lose your 5 litres of blood volume falling over.
So my question's about like the memory. So you say that there seems to be, we trial these different things, but there seems to be maybe a memory, some old cells that keep, then just go, oh no, I know what you're doing and I'm going to do this. Do you then decide, well, just wipe out the immune system and start again? Or is that maybe,
No, that's a really good question. Believe it or not, absolutely. A few decades ago, that was one of the thinking, that let's do a bone marrow transplant in our ITP patients, where essentially you're given, extremely high doses of really, chemotherapy, not obviously trying to treat cancer, but really to wipe out everything in the bone marrow in terms of stem cells and start again, right? So really, literally, we're going to just scorch earth and just kill off everything. And you know what? That works for some, that does work for some autoimmune diseases, such as lupus, right? Absolutely. But there's something about ITP. Well, I'm not going to say...
We're special. Come
there
on.
are special... yeah. I've got to be careful to say, because there is a different spectrum of ITP called amegakaryocytic thrombocytopenia, where there's severe immune attack on the megakaryocytes in the bone marrow. So in those patients, we find 0 megakaryocytes. The immune system has wiped them out. Right, so there is a very extreme, I would like the extreme end of the ITP, I think, spectrum. Those patients do sometimes respond to that therapy, but we don't do it for ITP patients because that is rather heavy-handed, would be the word, to go through that sort of procedure. But I mean, that is absolutely the concept of what we're trying to do then with newer agents that we have, of wiping out that immune memory. But as I said, what we now realize is really, really hard is these long-lived plasma cells. They somehow escape all our therapeutic targeting thus far. So we have drugs that literally target plasma cells, right? There's a monoclonal antibody that will latch onto and kill plasma cells. But when we infuse that in the bloodstream, it needs to kind of find every single one of these plasma cells. And if they're in an area that we can't get to, you'll have that immune memory. You'll just remember. And therefore, you still have ITP. Yeah, that's the Holy Grail. That is the Holy Grail. Without a transplant. Yeah. Yep.
Can I ask you about inflammation?
Yeah.
So it's sort of seen as though that's a would that lead to the ITP, perhaps? But also, I got a little excited because my numbers went up. It was just because I had COVID last year.
Yeah.
It's just gone up to the inflammatory response. So I thought, well, there's an interesting dynamic around this that might cause maybe the disease.
So, yeah, absolutely. So inflammatory, what we call cytokines that are released during any sort of infection, inflammation, We know for a fact they have a huge impact in terms of how the immune cells function. And in fact, that's very likely, the explanation for all the symptoms of ITP and other immune diseases. So this fatigue that ITP patients feel, that fatigue is so common in any autoinflammatory disease. And it's probably no surprise that when we actually check for specific sort of cytokines, so there's one called interleukin-6, and it looks the same sort of, cytokines released when you have the flu or bad COVID. So that fatigue that everyone, people feel when they have active disease, it's real. It's the cytokines being released and sort of, giving you that terrible, sensation of just being absolutely knackered. And we know absolutely that the cytokines could affect how immune cells function, potentially, maybe affecting, whether they do evolve into memory, into plasmas or whatnot. So there is, and I know for a fact definitely that, with Phil's biobank, they're definitely looking at all those cytokines and inflammation markers. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think